This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
G20 summit closes with calls for greater cooperation and multilateralism. COP27 debates reduction of dependence on fossil fuels as African Development Bank defends Africa's use of its natural gas. And Tunisia's non-governmental organizations warn migrants about child trafficking and organ smuggling. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Let's begin with our top story. Chinese President Xi Jinping is urging G20 member states to collaborate more in developing the digital economy. At today's summit, he called for all parties to boost cooperation to benefit all countries. He reiterated that the G20 should uphold multilateralism. He said countries should look to innovation to facilitate post-pandemic recovery. Xi said development should be prioritized to bridge the digital divide. He said China has put forward a plan which aims to promote innovative applications of digital technology and realize inclusive sharing of the results. He said China remains willing to continue to cooperate with fellow G20 states to build a digital economy pattern that features inclusiveness, win-win cooperation, and common prosperity. Indonesia's President Joko Widodo has officially declared the G20 summit closed in Bali. He has handed over the presidency of the summit to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. India will formally assume the G20 presidency on December 1st, 2022. This year's summit is the largest gathering yet of this group of leaders since the pandemic began. The theme this year is Recover Together, Recover Stronger. The key issues discussed were global health architecture, digital transformation, and the energy transition. Leaders visited the Tahura Nagura Rai mangrove forest in Bali this morning, where they planted trees as a symbol of their efforts to preserve the environment. The G20 summit has adopted a leaders' declaration stressing the importance of international law and a multilateral system that safeguards world peace and stability. Tangbo has more.
The declaration of the G20 Bali Summit has just been released, in which member states see it's very essential to uphold international law and multilateral system that safeguard peace and stability. It notes that G20 central banks will continue to appropriately calibrate pace of monetary policy tightening in a data-dependent and clearly communicated manner while limiting cross-country spillovers. And that is in line with what President Xi Jinping said on Tuesday, that developed economies should mitigate the negative spillovers from their monetary policy adjustment. And the member states would also resolve to pursue efforts to limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the declaration also says the member states must take temporary and targeted measures to help sustain purchasing power of most vulnerable, cushion the impact of commodity price increases. And today, G20 leaders participated in the third working session focusing on digital transformation. And that is something President Xi Jinping also stressed during his speech in the first working session on Tuesday, noting that China has proposed the action on digital innovation and cooperation and looks forward to working with all parties to foster an open, fair, and non-disciplinary environment for digital economy.
Economic experts have been reacting to a speech delivered at the G20 Leaders Summit by Chinese President Xi Jinping. Henry Molea, an economic development advocate in Zambia, says he agrees with President Xi that peace and development must go hand in hand. He says the proposals made by China at the summit are what developing nations have been looking forward to.
What we need to realize is that there is a link between development and peace. And also, considering that we are in the 21st century, we need to realize that we can no longer have development of conquests, And unfortunately, that has been the agenda of the West. It's more about who is a superpower. But what China is bringing on board is the fact that you cannot have development without peace. And I think we've seen the examples of what has happened with the war in Ukraine. You know, we've seen that global food cannot move, you know. The food that was being produced in that area cannot reach people, and that means you are going to get more people starving, you see. So what China is proposing is for the entire world to realize that the development and peace move hand in hand.
Meanwhile, Dr. Malaliku Keller from the Namibia University of Science and Technology says that China's development is revolutionary in modern Asian history. He adds that China has provided the world with opportunities for rapid development through opening up and promoting global development.
China is the greatest story to have come out of Asia in recent history, in the sense that not so long ago, China was regarded as one of the poorest countries, but in 30 years' time, they managed to emerge to become one of the great leaders in the economic sense of the word. Now, ever since China assumed the status of being one of the largest economies in the world, they have done quite a tremendous job in facilitating, promoting, and supporting global growth. China is the largest, one of the largest exporters of manufactured products all over the world. China has got one of the largest financial markets in the world, and China's footprint in developing countries is one of the largest, meaning therefore that at this conference, China's voice will carry a lot of weight.
Let's head over to Ethiopia now, where the International Committee of the Red Cross says 2 trucks carrying medical supplies arrived in the Tigrayan regional capital on Tuesday in what it called the first aid delivery to the region since the fighting in the north resumed in August. Now, this came as Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed promised to honestly implement a ceasefire agreement between his government and Tigrayan forces. He says this will ensure that sustainable peace is maintained. Under this deal signed earlier this month, both parties pledged to allow unhindered humanitarian access into Tigray and ensure the disarmament of rebel forces.
For the peace of the country, for the development and prosperity of the nation, we will go anywhere for negotiations. That is why we went to Kenya last week. There are no places that we do not want to go for the benefit of Ethiopia. There are people who profit from the war inside the country. That is why they lose through efforts of peace and negotiation. There are, on the other hand, others who hate war. So some are merchants of war and some are ambassadors of peace. Our confusion is on those who prefer neither peace nor war, but for us, we prefer peace. This was our stand before, and it's the same now and will always be the same.
COP27 is entering its final few days, and the theme on Tuesday was energy. Yasser Hakim has more from Sharm el-Sheikh, the host city of the UN Climate Conference.
Reducing dependence on fossil fuels dominated sessions as they're responsible for 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Energy is a major pillar of the climate change crisis, and striking a deal between developed and developing nations would be crucial to reaching the targets of COP27.
The Africa Just and Affordable Energy Transition Initiative was launched to provide renewable energy access to underprivileged communities in Africa.
Actually, we all depend on each other. So I'm using the phrases, we're looking for clean and just energy transitions and additions. We're looking for climate adaptation, not just mitigation. Africa needs an energy system which helps billions of people have better lives.
China's climate envoy, Xie Xinhua, also highlighted China's global milestones, being the fastest growing clean energy producer, with 272.5 gigawatts in wind energy, 263.1 gigawatts in solar energy, and more than 251 gigawatts of hydro energy.
It's not just about reducing emissions, it's also about providing more clean and just and affordable energy services. And China has been a huge player in developing the global solar supply chain. I'm sure we will see more leadership coming out of China.
Experts have warned the outstanding issues on energy need to be addressed as a priority.
I think the conversation is both that energy should be enabling reduction of emissions and try to keep the hope of 1.5, but on the other side it's also recipient sector to make resilient networks. Without energy, no other sector also can exist. So I think that we are on the right track in terms of thinking and conversations.
With COP27 nearing a close, experts say the conversation should now be translated into action. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
The president of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, has said the right of African countries to exploit their natural gas reserves should be reflected in any deal at the COP27 climate talks, even as some nations push to curtail the use of fossil fuels. Agreeing on a deal on fossil fuels is among the key sticking points at the talks. Countries including India are keen to phase down the use of all such fuels, including natural gas. A preliminary document from the conference hosted arrived late on Monday and made no mention of fossil fuels, with the world currently on course to miss its climate goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average by mid-century. One focus at the conference has been on countries accelerating their shift to renewable energy. Even if Africa were to triple its production of natural gas from current levels, its contribution to global emissions would only rise by 0.67%.
What this has shown us is this. We've got to diversify energy sources. Also that it's not just about access to energy, it's about affordability of energy. It's also about energy security. Therefore, it is very important that Europe diversifies its energy sources. And guess what? Africa can be a very important source of Europe in terms of access to gas. I think we must recognize the special nature of Africa. Africa has the highest level of energy poverty in the world. We will maximize the sun, we will maximize wind, we will maximize hydro and geothermal potential, yes.
Let's turn our attention to Tunisia now, where non-governmental organizations have warned irregular migrants against the dangers of child trafficking and organ smuggling. Adnan Shuashi has the details.
Suspicions of organ trafficking have been reported by volunteer doctors who work for Tunisian and European NGOs after the repatriation of the remains of Tunisian irregular migrants over the past 2 years.
The number of candidates for irregular migration has skyrocketed, while the number of sea and land routes are limited and unsafe. Families no longer hesitate to risk their lives. Children are often trapped. All smuggling of organs and child trafficking occurs during irregular migration attempts inside the Schengen space.
The Observatory of the Forum for Economic and Social Rights, which specializes in migration issues, warns that undocumented migrants, including children, are the target of criminal networks throughout Europe.
Once they reach Europe, undocumented migrants, including women and children, live in poor conditions. They are exposed to more danger. Many are pushed by criminal groups into drug trafficking and sexual exploitation. The hellish experience does not end on European soil. It rather gets worse.
Valentina Zagaria is an Italian researcher who documents the flows of irregular migrants in the Mediterranean basin, Africa and Europe. Zagaria blames European countries for pushing back child migrants at the borders.
It is a fact that Europe makes it very difficult to access its territory legally. The only people who are not sent back to Tunisia are minors and kids. It's illegal to deport them. That is why irregular migrants are younger. Europe's restrictions are behind the surge in migrant children trafficking.
Tunisian and European activists have called on authorities and families to protect children and guarantee them the right to health and education, instead of pushing them to risk their lives in the central Mediterranean Sea route. The stretch of the Mediterranean Sea between North Africa and Italy is one of the main migratory routes to Europe. Local NGOs are urging the Tunisian government to exchange information with Libya another main crossing point, and Italy on suspicions of child trafficking and organ smuggling. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Ethiopia's economy is expected to grow by at least 7.5% in the year to July 2023 from 6.4% last year. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed shared this projection with the country's parliament on Tuesday. Africa's second most populous nation is eyeing an economic rebound after the COVID-19 pandemic and the conflict in the Tigray region, which slowed expansion in the past 2 years. Here is CGTN's Guru Chala with more.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has assured lawmakers of the resilience of Ethiopia's economy. He said the conflict in the north has harshly affected the country, but maintained the economy had withstood the multiple shocks that affected it since 2020.
Our economy has proven it won't break easily. It has successfully sustained the growth trajectory. Many people, including those within the country and global economies, have been confused about how this economy passed through all the challenges and remained resilient.
Ethiopian legislators sought clarity from the Prime Minister on the prospects for the economy, which last year saw growth decline to 6.4%.
Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, how is the Ethiopian macroeconomic situation at the moment? What's your assessment of the economic performance?
What's being done to expand investment in the country? I believe the state can encourage investors for the economy to grow even more. What is the size of the economy currently?
By the end of the 2021-2022 budget year, our economy rose to 6.16 trillion birr. This is equivalent to $126.7 billion US. You all remember we have been aiming to pass the $100 billion mark, as was the case before. The per capita income in Ethiopia has reached $1,212 US. Beyond that, our economy now is the largest in Eastern Africa and the third largest in Sub-Saharan Africa.
The service sector has played a major role in advancing Ethiopia's economic growth. State-owned corporations such as Ethiopian Airlines have led in this contribution, while the agriculture and industry sectors registered major advancement.
Our plan this year is to achieve at least 7.5% economic growth. If we can maintain the current peace situation, we can attain 7.5% economic expansion. Last year's 6.4% growth was achieved through diversified economic engagement. We should not focus on a few sectors such as agriculture-led or an industry-led economy. We must explore all sectors for continued success.
The nation of 115 million has been one of the world's fastest growing economies in the past 15 years, boosted by heavy infrastructure investment, but the COVID-19 pandemic and conflict in the Tigray region slowed expansion in the past 2 years. After the signing of a peace act, first in Pretoria and later on implementation details in Nairobi between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF, the Eastern African nation is seeking to bounce back to its former glory days when it was one of the world's leading countries in economic growth. Grumtala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Stay tuned. Let's take a peek at the headline. In sports, Nigeria's cricket team prepares for ICC T20 Africa qualifiers in Rwanda. Welcome into Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta. Let's get going with cricket. The Nigerian cricket team is continuing with its preparations ahead of the ICC T20 World Cup Africa sub-regional qualifiers scheduled for Rwanda later this month. The Yellow Greens, who are now under the guidance of new head coach and retired Kenyan legend Steve Tikola, are in a tough Group B, as CGTN's Deji Badamosi reports.
I'm not happy with the number of guys.
The sub-regional qualifiers will be a stand test for Steve Tikolo, as it will be the first time he will be taking Nigeria to a competition following his appointment as head coach and high-performance manager. And he's not leaving anything to chance as he puts his boys through their paces in this training session.
Well, we have a very good chance. Obviously, I've seen the players in the past week or so. I've also know some of the Nigerian players from my time with the Kenya team, Uganda team and Tanzania team. And I believe we have the talent to do well in that tournament. Obviously in life there's always pressure one way or the other. But again, I'm confident of the way I do my work, looking to work hard with the team so that we qualify as part of the two teams that will go forward into the next tournament.
As part of their preparation, the team has played 3 trial games. They're expected to be in camp for 20 days, after which they will proceed on a pre-tour before the first match in Rwanda against Mozambique on December the 1st.
It has been a great experience with the new coach. The team's chances are really high because we're going in as we're not underdogs at this tournament. There's a very high chance for us to qualify into the next stage of the tournament. We just need to apply ourselves and play to the best of our abilities, and then everything will go on well.
For Coach Tikolo, while his appointment is another milestone in his coaching career, it's the first time he will be managing cricket in an environment where the sport is not popular, despite having been played in the country since the late 19th century.
The performances of the team have grown in the last 4 to 5 years. Nigeria has taken part in the pre-qualifiers for the World Cup in Dubai for the senior team. We saw the under-19 take part in the Cricket World Cup. And obviously the other day we saw the under-19s qualifying for the next stage of the under-19 World Cup. So in my opinion, the last 5 years or so have been good for Nigeria cricket in terms of growth.
It's a new chapter and a new challenge for the former coach of the Ugandan national cricket team. If he is eventually able to take Nigeria to its first ever T20 Cricket World Cup, he would have written his name in the folklore of Nigeria cricket. Deji Bademasi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Let's talk a bit of football. With 4 days to go before the start of the World Cup, football fans are soaking up the atmosphere in the streets of Doha. Souk Waqif, a popular tourist destination in the city center, is full of locals, tourists, and football fans from different countries. As participating teams begin to arrive in Qatar, the excitement among football fans has begun to kick in. The tournament will kick off on Sunday with the host playing Ecuador in a Group A opener at the Al Bayt Stadium.
It's a very good atmosphere. Everybody is happy. The Arab countries taking part are all being welcomed as well as all other international teams. There's a lot of security, and that's a good thing too. It's a bit hot, but the atmosphere is really great.
We've got about 15 games that we're booked. 15, yeah. And we go home, we fly back just before the final, fly back home on the 14th of December.
France forward Christopher Nkunku will miss the World Cup after suffering an injury in training on Tuesday. The RB Leipzig forwards left Tuesday's training session early with a left knee injury. A video circulating on social media showed Nkunku clash with teammate Eduardo Camavinga. According to a statement by the French Football Federation, the X-ray examinations revealed it was a strain. The French Federation added that the player's replacement would be announced once the medical files were sent to FIFA and had been validated. France will also be without injured defender Presnel Kimpembe, who was ruled out because of a hamstring injury. Eden Hazard believes he has a lot to offer Belgium at the World Cup and is confident he can prove his doubters wrong during the global showpiece. Hazard, who will be going to the World Cup for the 3rd time, is the captain of Belgium, but has barely played for Real Madrid this season after falling out of favor under coach Carlo Ancelotti. The 31-year-old, however, is comparing the situation to the European Championships in 2020, when he also went into the competition lacking game time. Belgium, who finished third at the 2018 World Cup, have been drawn in Group F and opened their campaign against Canada on the 23rd of November before taking on Morocco and Croatia.
I have a great desire to play. It is especially this desire that gives me strength, because I haven't played for a long time, so I'm even more eager than before to show that I can still play. I want to show the Belgian people that I am still here, that they can count on their captain. It might be our last chance with this great generation to win something, so we will try to give it our all.
FIFA President Gianni Infantino has urged G20 leaders to consider a temporary one-month ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine conflict for the duration of the Qatar World Cup starting on November the 20th. Infantino said this while addressing G20 leaders that had gathered for an outdoor lunch after their first meeting at the summit in Bali.
So my plea to all of you is to think on a temporary ceasefire for 1 month for the duration of the World Cup, or at least the implementation of some humanitarian corridors or anything that could lead to the resumption of dialogue as a first step to peace.
And in tennis, Felix Auger-Aliassime left Rafael Nadal's title hopes at the ATP Finals in tatters as he beat the struggling Spaniard 6-3, 6-4 in round-robin action in Turin on Tuesday. Nadal needed to win the year-end title for the first time in his illustrious career to have a chance of ending the season as world #1. But he faded out badly after an encouraging start. The 35-year-old was beaten by American Taylor Fritz in his opener on Sunday and is bottom of the group with one match remaining against Norway's Casper Ruud. Auger-Aliassime will face Fritz in his final group match with a chance of making the last four. A year after Novak Djokovic's high-profile deportation from Australia because he was not vaccinated against COVID-19, the 21-time Grand Slam champion is set to be granted a visa to enter the country so he can compete at the Australian Open in January. Djokovic is currently participating in the season-ending ATP Finals in Turin, Italy, where he won his opening match Monday against Stefanos Tsitsipas 6-4, 7-6, and is next scheduled to play on Wednesday against Andrei Rublev. After Monday's victory, Djokovic indicated that his lawyers were in touch with the Australian government with an eye to him being able to contest the Australian Open, which runs from January the 16th to the 29th. Well, that is it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send us your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. For the team, I'm Richard Ntah saying thank you so much for watching, and we'll have more Africa Live coming your way in just under 6 hours' time. So stay tuned to CGTN.